So I'm going to start that now.
Yep, good.
And we'll just do a quick test. So if you just want to tell me one interesting fact about New Jersey that I don't know.
It's a great question. Two or three of the biggest Revolutionary War battles happened in New Jersey, and we don't really get credit for that. So since we were talking about that before, that's one I'll cite for you.
Great. Thank you.
Can I give you one more?
Yes, please.
Now that I'm thinking about it, I think, and I don't know if I can prove this statistically, that more celebrities were born in New Jersey than any other state. They all then moved out and never came back. So kind of a double-edged sword there.
Yeah, so it's a great place for stars to be born, we can
And
say.
and then leave.
And then, then immediately leave. Perfect. Okay.
Exactly.
Great. So we'll just do a silent audio test. So just for about 20 seconds or so here, just to pick up any background noises, fans, etc. So just hang with me for about 20 seconds here. Okay. All right. I think we can jump in. Like I said, I'm going to do a little intro here. But then, just I just wanted to let you know that we don't have a ton of editing going on the back end. So
Mhm.
if you need to stop, that's fine. Just stop, take a breath, continue through or
Sure.
reiterate your point. But we really do a lot of minimal edits, so it's just going to feel more like a casual conversation
Yeah,
rather
that's
than like
fine.
a highly produced thing. So, okay,
Sounds
great.
good.
Okay. Welcome to Next to Nonprofits. I'm Katie Bauer, and today I'm pleased to be joined by Lou Kotsinis of I'm sorry, let me start over. BCS Interactive. Okay, let me hang on.
It's funny you
And
pronounce the name correctly, and the name is the tricky part.
I think that's what I think I was like, oh, I didn't ask him if it was Kotsinis. Is that
Kotsinis, yeah.
correct? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
it's
Okay.
your
Okay,
Greek is
great.
very good.
Great. But let me get your company's name right. And you are the co-founder and CEO, is that correct?
That's what I go by,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, great. Welcome to Next Nonprofits. I'm Katie Bauer, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Lou Kotsinis of the oh my gosh, so sorry.
No
I
worries. No worries.
it's always nerve-wracking to get started. Once I get started, I'm fine. Um,
100%.
okay. Welcome to Next in Nonprofits. I'm Katie Bauer, and today I'm pleased to be joined by Lou Kotsinis, the co-founder and CEO of BCS Interactive. Lou, thanks for joining me today.
Awesome to be with you, Katie. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I can't wait to get started on a conversation about website optimization for nonprofits. Really looking forward to dive into that. But before we do, could you share a little bit with our audiences about who you are, what you do, about your company?
Sure, sure. So, well, who I am, we were talking a little bit before the start of this. I'm a Jersey guy, born and raised. If you haven't noticed from the second I open up my mouth, and I live here with my wife and two daughters. I went to school nearby in Rutgers University, at Rutgers University, I should say. Professionally, I come from a corporate marketing background. I had done a stint at Time Warner in their book publishing division, and then I left to start BCS Interactive. And in short, we are a digital agency focused exclusively on the nonprofit and educational sectors. And we offer services primarily in three distinct areas. So the first is very foundational. It's digital strategy, providing clients not just with guidance on the tools and systems that they need to launch successful marketing campaigns, but also on the tactics themselves. So, what constitutes a strong digital marketing program, and how can we bring awareness to our cause? Secondly, which is really what we're talking about today, is we do a lot of website design and digital storytelling. So that's essential to our topic here. And then once we have those kind of framework items in place, we work with clients to help them grow their audience through what I call growth marketing, but primarily our focus has been really running paid social media advertising campaigns. That's really where the most emphasis is these days in terms of growing an audience. But the website is core to what we do, and it's really a topic that I'm very passionate about, and I know you are as well.
Yeah, so obviously the role of the website has changed so much in the
Yeah,
last 20, 30 years.
sure.
Um, how are nonprofits using their websites these days?
Well, the question is, how are they using them and how should they be using them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the successful ones, and I don't mean to, marginalize or categorize anybody. This is all about improvement of the organization. The successful ones use this as their central storytelling tool. Because if you think about it, KD, social is really where things are at these days. I'll just start by saying that, meaning people are spending most of their time there and fewer people are clicking back to websites from there. And we'll talk about that separately. But those people that are coming to a nonprofit website are what I call the true believers, right? They have found out about your organization through a referral, through seeing you offline, through attending an event, through a friend, through an AI search, all different kinds of places. And they want to learn more about you so they can support you. So when they come there, the strongest organizations really have emphasized this as a place where they're collecting, they're gathering, they're getting visited by their greatest supporters, and then they give them an incredible experience, both from a user experience and especially from a storytelling experience, so that when people arrive, they know they're in the right place. You're engaging them through the right information and right content and imagery, and then you're frankly guiding them in kind of a natural, methodical fashion to get them to the action item you want them to take. So I know that's a lot, but I would answer that question by saying the way it should be used is as a storytelling device. Some of the smaller organizations that don't have capacity, and we can talk about this, are doing the best they can to talk about their impact and their mission. And all I would kind of advise them on and argue with them. That's really, I don't want to argue with them, but what I would argue to them is to develop the best experience they can over time to start to court some of those visitors.
Right. And it's storytelling being such a core component of just the website experience. You have to know who your audience is, right? So if you're reading a short story to a group of third graders, it's a very
Mhm.
different audience than giving a speech at a political event. So
100%.
when nonprofits are thinking about who their audiences are, and obviously nonprofits are very community engaged, they're aware of who their nonprofits are or
Mhm.
who their audiences are. But when we think about a website, what are some questions that organizations can ask themselves to kind of hone
Mhm.
in on how their website functions and what is on the website and kind of
Mhm.
cross that bridge to help identify and hone in on who the audience really is for them?
Mhm. Well, I would say that you start with audience first, right? And this could be a whole other separate conversation, but it really doesn't have to be this high level kind of MIT study, right? You start with intuition, right? And an executive director, even at a small organization, knows who their audience is intuitively, right? Because they have courted these individuals, they serve these individuals. So it's a matter of starting to talk to some of these people and understand, look at your donor list and understand who they really are, and then start to build out, I'm going to use a marketing term here, personas, right? Just a snapshot of the individual tends to be of this age, they tend to live in this region, these are their interests, and just start to build it from there. It's just a continual process. And then either you yourself as executive director, or if you have team members, start to fan out a bit and have these conversations with these individuals and learn more over time. This is all an iterative process. If you want to get really technical, you can then start to marry that with data. And what do I mean by that? Well, you probably have a feel for who your Facebook community is. You can see that just by, perusing the community, or you can look behind the scenes at insights, which is not really the most technical thing in the world, and start to paint a picture with data in combination to what you've learned intuitively and from your kind of what we call qualitative research. Once you start to have that, a picture starts to form in your mind in terms of the experience you should be putting up on your website. And then it comes down to, well, let's look at our brand first, right? Are we positioned properly to meet this individual where they are? And by branding, I'm using several interchangeable things here. Is our mission statement in line with what they want to see? Is our messaging, as soon as they arrive at the website, are we telling them exactly what we do and catering that language to that individual? And once we have that, is the additional content that we're putting there supporting that? Are we engaging them? Are they interested in coming to that? So, and then it goes on from there. Then you can start to look at the technical aspects and the user experience. But that core engagement when they first come to the site is really super critical. And I don't think you really need to have a marketing team do this for you. I think a lot of this is based on your own experience and then your ability to just go into your own website and make basic updates. Is my language correct? Do I have the right images? Are my images quality? Am I using stock images? God forbid. We try and talk clients out of that. So, again, that's kind of the broad-based picture of how we would educate clients on this. But there's a lot of room there to grow in terms of specifics.
Okay, yeah. So let's just imagine that I'm a part-time, communications manager at a nonprofit. And I want people to arrive at the website and do a very specific thing, right?
Yeah.
How do I infuse story into that? And what is a really strong story that you potentially could tell to get
Mhm.
to, and instead of just moving someone from point A to point B
Sure.
and signing up for a form, like what is the story and what are the
Sure.
elements that
Sure.
potentially I could engage with?
So the key word here is empathy, right? It's
Mm,
kind of what I was saying before, is to put yourself in your audience's shoes and look at it from that perspective. Take yourself out of your own biases and actually put yourself in that person's shoes, which, by this point, And then once they're arriving there, impact is the key word, right? And I think you know this as a nonprofit specialist, which is what are we doing in our community or for this audience that will actually resonate with this individual so that they see not only are we trustworthy, but their money, their support of us is really in good hands because we are making things happen. Now, that can manifest itself in a number of ways. It can be data that you put up there. It can be a video testimonial, which we highly encourage. Really, it comes down to what type of organization, you are. But just giving the user that experience that their money with you will be well spent. There's going to be impact coming out of it. And that can happen in multiple locations in the website, right? If they arrive at the homepage, you can start there. If they have found you through a search and they arrive at a services page, the lesson there is that really you should be putting impact on every page of the website where you think these individuals will reside. But it doesn't have to be this really high level concept. It's basics. It's thinking about who your audience is and then what impact can I show them? And then Katie, technically making sure that things work to get you to that point, because there's nothing worse than actually attracting that audience, piquing their interest, and then the donate button, the donation page doesn't work, or the site isn't being hosted properly, or there's some kind of blockage to that. So that's also something important to consider.
yeah. Um, so when you're looking at a website, what are some key things that you're looking for to improve engagement overall?
Well, I would look at user experience, right? Let's start from the technical standpoint first. Um, again, if you provide some kind of a service and individuals are coming to either engage or learn about that service, that core operation needs to work. I mean, a classic example is a foundation, right? Foundations need to assess grant applications and consider who they're going to fund. If that function of your website isn't working, you're losing that individual, right? Or if you're, promoting a capital campaign, I don't know, and they come to that page and that isn't working or it's insecure, you've lost them right there. So let's worry about making sure that they're there to begin with. Again, in terms of engaging, you want to establish an emotional connection, don't you? Right? And that is putting up the right video that kind of hits home, and it doesn't have to be this expensive proposition, right? It can be something, I don't want to say low quality, but it doesn't have to be high budget, or imagery that speaks to what it is that you're doing in the community, or a blog post that you as an organization know best how to communicate to your audience. But well, I guess the takeaway here is to really put the effort in and the hard work to do it. Rather than just putting up something just to say, okay, yeah, our website's done, we put it up, that's fine. There's things that you can do to improve that. For example, showing all of this content to your existing donors or someone that you trust that is already funding the organization or supporting the organization and saying, hey, what do you think of this? Does this resonate with you? And I think a lot of nonprofits, either from a capacity standpoint or just from a kind of a self-conscious standpoint, don't want to do that because they're afraid of what they might hear back. And I would
Mm.
encourage you to put it out there, be transparent with the people. Don't necessarily talk to the board about this. Don't keep it to your team. Speak to those people who you're aspiring to bring in and allow them to vet the content that you're putting up. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I love centering, audiences and customizing things that are specific for those audiences. And actually engaging these engaging conversations that you have with your donors and your communities outside of the website can
Mhm.
be communicated and back to them through the
Yeah,
website, right? So
100%.
that's super great. Um,
Yeah.
in an earlier conversation, we talked about a how the website is like a living, breathing thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah, I know that comes across as weird, but it's just the only way I know to express it in a way that kind of makes sense, which is, you know, if a smaller organization or really any organization wants to succeed on the web, there's a mindset shift that needs to take place, which is, and I feel badly for organizations that don't have the capacity to do this, and we can talk about that, but many organizations make the mistake of creating their website and they put it up and they say, great, we made the website investment. And then for 2 years, they don't really do anything to it. They just, oh, well, it should be working for us and it should be, right? But if you think about it, KD, the society changes, your audience changes, technology changes. Why on earth wouldn't you change your website along with it? Now, that doesn't mean that every 3 years you have to go spend 20, 30, $40,000 on a website, right? That's doing that kind of redesign, which frankly we do all the time. It's kind of a blunt instrument, right? What you really want to do is, even with your existing website, is look at it. We advocate once a week, and I realize that might be a lot for some causes, but at a minimum once a month. And when you're there, look at it from that kind of top-down perspective that you and I were talking about. Start from the very core functionality. Number one, is it up? Right? Because sometimes you're focusing on social or whatever, and the site might not be working properly. So is it up? Is it working properly? Again, operationally, are the core functions that you need in operation, and are they working in a way that is keeping your audiences happy? And then focus on that storytelling, and then look at that once a month. Is the imagery that we have up there, is it still relevant? Or are we using stock photography from an audience member that really isn't us? Because you don't want to look antiquated either. So all I encourage organizations to do is have a pulse for what's going on out there and make sure that your website is in on par with that. And if it is, you really don't have to invest this huge amount every couple of years in redesigning your site because you've taken care of it. So that's kind of my general understanding of it, or my interpretation of it. And that's why I consider it kind of this living, breathing thing, because it is.
Yeah, I love that. I also just love the advice. Once a week, block off a day or block off a half a day or even 2 hours where your job is just to look at the website, think about your audiences,
Mhm.
and more than updating, oh, we have a workshop that we have to
Right.
update, the time of, or it shifted dates, or we have to get this registration link up. Beyond that, how are you infusing storytelling? How are you really meeting your audience and your community where they're at? How are you validating their experience and leading with empathy in that? And what are those small and medium changes that you can make to really create your website and make it this living, breathing entity?
That,
And
that's a, that's I'm sorry to interrupt. That's a great way to put it. And one thing I would add to that, and I want to hear your
yeah,
remaining comment, because as you were mentioning this, a thought popped into my mind. A living, breathing organism has continually, it kind of regenerates itself, right? And the website, one thing that is still a very valid tactic, but because it takes so much effort, a lot of organizations don't do it, is blogging, right? Search engines, and now I'm going to mention AI as well too, including AI bots, right? And search assistants, or I should say AI assistants, want fresh content, right? They want to know that you're producing value in the world. Nonprofits have an endless supply of things that they can talk about because they, by definition, are expert in the niche that they have chosen, whether you're an environmental organization or a healthcare related organization or human services or homelessness or what have you. You are the expert. You know more about that topic than many people out there. So I would encourage, again, not to add to the workload, but this is really what is indicative of a thriving site, is to be able to post once a month, just an original piece that you can talk about that differentiates you from, your competitors in that field. And that will most definitely kind of keep the site vibrant. There's search benefits. There's so much. We could have a whole other conversation about blogging and how important it is. And so I'm sorry I cut you off. You had something really important to say, and I jumped in with that.
Well, you read my mind
No,
because
really.
I was just going to talk about SEO a little bit, search engine optimization, and
Hmm.
how blogging is very important for that. And in addition, there's a lot of opportunities with Google grants for nonprofits, right? So you get free money, to uh, have the advertisement in the Google search like further
Yeah.
up in the list, right? And Google Grants does have preferences over new content, which means blog writing and blog posts. So people do get overwhelmed with the idea of creating a blog. How
Hmm.
scary is maintaining a monthly blog actually? Like, is it doable
Yeah.
for a small nonprofit team?
So it is doable. It is doable, but it requires dedication. And there's a lot of tactics and techniques you can use to make that easier. The number one thing I would say is I wouldn't overthink what you're going to write about. And I was in this position myself, running an agency, knowing I was responsible for blogging and having to do a million other things. The biggest piece of advice I could give someone struggling with this is every day you are dealing with constituents, you are dealing with your area of interest, you are dealing with donors, you're dealing with, I don't know, program recipients. They're asking you questions. It's those questions that are going to feed what you're writing about. And it has this beautiful virtual cycle because, you're hearing from them and you're thinking to yourself, well, if they have questions here, there must be other people that want these answers. And it's your job really to provide them. So those are your blog topics right there. I mean, you can do the very elaborate searching for keywords and doing all that kind of stuff. That's an uphill battle. And I don't think most nonprofits have the time or really, frankly, the need to do that because it's really competitive. But what you are doing is talking about things that bring value to your audiences, listening to what they're saying and writing about that. And then you'll see a whole ton of benefits, not the least of which you'll have a consistent set of topics that you can just write about very naturally. And by the way, I should also add to that, Katie, is that it doesn't have to be this 7,000 word
Ah,
treatise, right?
right.
I would say do it more than a couple of paragraphs, right? But there is no more, well, Google looks for this or AI looks for this. It's really about writing for human beings, right? Even though to just undercut myself, there are these AI platforms, they're bots looking at bots, but that's a whole other that's a whole other story. I wouldn't go back on my advice there. You write for humans, write for your audience, and that's what's going to help you maintain a successful blog. But you have to keep doing it, right? You do it once a month. You have to keep doing it and not stop, and that's where it becomes a challenge.
Yep, yep. I totally hear that. I think there's so many more benefits with keeping your website up to date, doing blog writing, adding new content than just you see on the website, right? It's
Mhm.
an overall benefit for your entire brand, for your entire community, because if you write a blog post, that's another social media post. Now you have content for your newsletter that you send out, and you're linking everything back to your home base, which is your homepage. So I actually have a question here. With the changing landscape of social media and, people are staying on social media and not
Mhm.
necessarily going to the website, how does creating new content, if it does center or recenter your brand, and what are the positive outcomes of that?
Mhm. Well, let's start with the search component, right? If you're putting new content on your website, Google and ChatGPT and Claude, I'm just naming some AI platforms for your audience that may not know them, they're still looking at websites for this kind of thing. So I wouldn't not, blog thinking that people aren't going to find you that way. So it's very important from a search standpoint to continue to do that. I want to make sure I understood your full question. When it comes to those other silos that we're talking about, you are correct indeed that, there's a concept called zero click marketing, which is really the future of where marketing credit for that. It came from a woman named Amanda Natividad is her name from Spark Toro. And I would actually check them out because they're pioneers as far as that goes. But the idea there is that people, and we all do it, people are spending more and more time in a specific platform and they're not necessarily leaving there. I mean, that's really what Facebook wants at the end of the day or what Instagram wants. They don't want you leaving. So they'll actually penalize links if you put them in there. It happens to me on LinkedIn all the time. That being said, Obviously you just said it yourself, putting together really good content and then publishing it on various platforms will help you. But that doesn't mean that just because fewer people are coming to your site, that nobody's coming to your site. The person who is now coming to your site, again, is what I call the true believer. This is a person who is on Facebook learning about you over time and finally says, you know what, I want to support this organization. Let me go to their website and see what they're all about. And that's when they will potentially come to that blog and see all this content that you've put out in their area of expertise that they want to learn about, or these answers that you've provided about some specific niche healthcare problem that they want to solve. And so there's a multitude of benefits, as you mentioned before, about continually blogging, both from a zero click and a search capacity.
Right. Yeah. So if you aren't blogging right now on your website, and you're looking for new content, it's a great way to do it. So think about it, talk to your team about it, talk to a board member, see if it's possible. All
I
right.
can add to that too,
Yeah.
Katie, just a little
Yeah.
bit. We might as well touch base on this because I know your mind is there as well too, as we're talking about this. Do I use AI to write blog posts? Look, the bottom line is I wouldn't. I wouldn't. The way that I do this, and I'd love to hear from you as well too, if you do this, is I write very original content. In other words, I'll listen to our clients' concerns using that process I talked about before and write an answer based on my intuition, my expertise, our case studies, that kind of thing, and put that out. And then I will run it through Claude or ChatGPT and say, what do you think of this? Is it factually correct? Are there areas that I can improve? And that really helps the process, the act as an editor. I would resist the temptation to just saying, write me a blog post on this, right? We may get to a point where that's going to happen. It may happen very soon. But the whole point of the blogging that you and I are talking about is to create something original, something valuable that you as a human create and that others can't touch because people are readily flagging AI content now, and that's going to hurt your cause as opposed to supporting it, which is what you're trying to do through original posts. Sorry again, I cut you off.
No, no, I'm so glad we touched on this.
Mhm.
Because yeah, resist the temptation to ask AI to write full copy for you. Case
Right.
studies, who's going to tell the story better, AI or a testimonial after a conversation that you had with someone who really benefited from your services and programs, right? Who's really going to write that better? And what story is actually going to resonate better, right? So, if you're pulling together a list of resources and you need AI to organize it in a more, in an easier to read list or something, like take these 87 bullet points and, group them by type of resource or something. That's one thing, but when you're talking about, the heartbeat of your mission, when you're talking about the people behind your mission, have a person tell that story. And if that's not you, that's fine.
Yeah.
Maybe it's people telling their own stories, and you have different writers who can rotate out each month, telling their own story and their own partnership with your organization or their own experience.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, I would totally agree with that. Okay, so let's talk about. I want to know you work. You've worked in this field for a long time, and you're an expert. And I just want to pick your brain as much as I possibly can on this.
Please.
So what is a area that nonprofits tend to overlook when it comes to their websites?
I'm just going to go off the top of my head here. And the first thing that comes to mind is, and we've kind of touched base on this already, is I don't think they realize how important photography is. That's a blanket statement, and it's not meant to punish anybody. I know how hard it is to get really good photography, but it really almost makes or breaks the experience that an individual has on a website. And I'm just going to start with that kind of, I'm going to say, dreaded stock photography. And then stock photography is not in and of itself bad. It's that if you're not a designer and you don't have a design sensibility, it's easily misused. And what you want is to create an authentic experience. You're an authentic organization. By definition, you are a human organization. You are helping human beings, right? So you want to try to emphasize the highest quality experience possible as far as those images and video are concerned. And so what we advise clients on is if you're working with an outside designer or even an agency, and you don't have the budget to do custom photography, and we can talk about that as well too. Um, work with the agency to have them pick the right kind of stock photography because they're well versed in this and they'll know what looks authentic and inauthentic for the most part. And that takes that off your plate. You'd be surprised how many boards have individuals that are really actually really good photographers, right? Or individuals that are willing to volunteer some time to do this. And it's worth taking that step to do that. The best case scenario is that you hire a professional photographer and it can really, again, we're talking about that emotional component where people come and they are truly moved. And that's really what you want. At the end of the day, it's a human to human experience. Video falls along those same lines. Video can get expensive, but try to emphasize the highest quality that you can. So that's one thing. And I'm forgetting what your question was. I'm sorry.
We're just talking about areas that nonprofits tend to overlook when it comes to their websites.
Right, right. And I would also again, impact is another area you hear the word impact in these discussions, and it gets bandied about a lot, but it really is meaningful. And you can emphasize impact in really the simplest ways. I mean, it should really start on your donation page. I'm a big fan of the $50 will provide, $100 will provide, but also proven impact, right? With this most recent donation, we achieved this, or whatever metric it is in with respect to your particular niche. But then throughout the website, testimonials from happy program recipients, or again, going back to small video testimonials, and just the idea of trying to add impact on every page. And again, every page is important because you don't know where they're coming in from. You mentioned before how the homepage is the most important page. I agree with you, it is. But then again, in some circumstances, it's not because remember how how visitors are finding you. We're everywhere on the web these days. It's not necessarily they come straight to the website. So I would say, imagery, impact, refining that content, making sure that that messaging is appropriate. And then it just comes down to what you would call the polish items. You and I spoke about this a little earlier. Make sure that donate button is visible, right? Make sure that the navigation, meaning when they come to the website and they see that drop down with all the different pages, does that intuitively make sense to you? Do you have things there? Do you have labels there that would only make sense to your inner circle? Or does that label make sense to a person who has never heard about your organization before? And those are tweaks that you can make directly through your own content management system.
Wow, I have so many different directions I can go here. To follow up on the photography piece, I think that one thing that nonprofits might overlook with that is um, photography is actually a core part of your brand, right? And
Mhm.
as you mentioned earlier, but thinking about things like lighting, angle, what kinds of people you are,
Yeah,
highlighting in the photography, what feeling are you trying to evoke? What is it warm? Is it cool? Like all of those elements are super important. And, hey, I'm a graphic design background, so I'm visually motivated, right?
right.
I might see an image before I read the words on a page and already make my decision on how I feel, right? So, really thinking about that with photography. Um, I think regarding impact, uh, impact again is just more than an impact number. We've served 1 million people,
Mhm.
over, in the tri-state area, over the last 5 years. It's more than that. Could you speak to some of the other impact elements that people could possibly include on their website?
Well, this is probably going to come right back to what we're talking about here, but I'll take a page out of my book, right? What moves me to give, right? So I'll be transparent with you. I mean, one of my values, one of the things that I want to support and pursue are democracy efforts in this country, and I give to several on a continual basis, several organizations that do that. So, impact to me in this regard is, are they making headway in moving democracy forward? And how are they doing that? Well, they're publishing this content that educates me so much about what's happening in this
Mm.
country and is giving me actionable insights in terms of what I can be doing right now to support democracy in the country. And then on top of that, they are doing exactly what you mentioned, which they're showing me statistics in terms of legal cases won. And they're giving me updates in terms of what they've done to kind of move that, needle forward. So it's really, I guess the general way to look at it is the people that are supporting your organization believe in your mission, right? Or they relate to your mission. How are you executing on that mission? I think it's still an abstract way. I wish I had something more specific to give you there, but it's this kind of overarching understanding that by giving to this organization, they are absolutely fulfilling that thing that's keeping me up at night, right?
Mm,
So one of our clients, the New Jersey Conservation Foundation, what they do is that they preserve hundreds and thousands of acres of land here in the great state of New Jersey, to prevent it from, becoming just, a warehouse. We have warehouses all over New Jersey, and we also have some of the most beautiful landscapes and parks and forests here. So what they do is they work to preserve that. And what they are showing me, because I'm also a donor there, is how many acres they have preserved. And they're showing me images of what they have preserved. And they're inviting me to go hiking there and attend rallies there. So, again, I'm just trying to give practical real world examples of showcasing to me that the money that I'm giving them is actually having a practical impact. Again, I don't know if that answers it,
yeah.
but that's
Oh,
how, yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. No, I feel this, and it goes back to that empathy piece, right?
Mhm.
So I think a lot of times, as marketing communications people at nonprofits, um, we're, kind of bogged down with the day-to-day a lot, right? So
Yeah,
there's a lot of day-to-day stuff. It's like, okay, just got to get this newsletter out, got to get this whatever
sure.
out, right? But I would really love to challenge. So beyond the program people
Hmm.
doing what they're supposed to do beyond the services that your organization is actually doing, how are
Hmm.
you serving your audience, right? So
Right.
what
Hmm.
what are what are those things that need to be shared outward beyond
Hmm.
an annual report to your
Right.
board? How do you take some of that information and generate content out of that,
Right.
and then make sure that it is getting put on your website in the proper way to show the impact in multiple ways, through images, through words, through charts, through a downloadable PDF, through a podcast, through an
That's right.
interview, through a testimonial. So I think there's just so many different ways to approach it, but you want to do what is right for your mission and your industry, of course. So
That's a wonderful kind of encapsulation of what we're talking about. And then that kind of takes us into brand, right? And I don't know if we necessarily need to go into that because that's a whole other discussion. But what you're talking about is all those different touch points that you have as an organization. If you are on a daily basis just looking at the quality of them and adding to the quality of them over time, you're going to start to get these organic, meaning you're not paying for it, results that will elevate your entire organization. So, if I could just make one comment, because you and I were talking a bit about capacity and if an organization doesn't have a lot of people, that kind of thing, how on earth do I even begin to take this all on? You don't have to take it all on, right? You have to, it's what you're doing every day in small amounts that will pay off over time. So, a book recommendation I would make here is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I don't know if you're familiar with this book.
I think it might be in my Amazon cart right now, but I have not purchased it.
It's not to put you on the spot. This is probably, as you can see behind me, I read a lot. And Atomic Habits may be the best nonfiction book I have ever read. And if you want me to crystallize it for you, and you can just go to AI and ask what it's all about. It's what you do every single day over time that is what's going to bring you these massive results. And so I would approach internal nonprofit marketing using that example. What can I, if I'm using a schedule and I assign myself half an hour to marketing every day or an hour to marketing every day, what are the most impactful things I can be doing? Right? That can be I'm reviewing the website to make sure it's up to date. I'm writing a little bit of a blog post that's going to go out at the end of the week. I'm looking at our social media community and making sure I'm putting out content, right? What are those things? And then you can add to that. It's the doing of it every day that will get you there instead of saying, oh my God, I've got these 20 marketing things to do. I don't know when I'm going to get to them. I don't have help. Start small and build from there is what we advise clients. And I'm actually talking from experience here because it's how I've built our business by doing those things because I do not have a marketing department. This is it. You're looking at it.
Mhm.
So that's how I ended up doing that and somewhat successfully.
Yes, I would say quite successfully.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
yes, I'm curious a little bit about how analytics might inform some key decisions on the website. Do you
Sure.
have any thoughts there?
It's funny. I wish I had my account manager with me because she's genius at all this stuff, and I don't spend as much time as I should in analytics, but I can obviously give you some of the core things to be looking at. So first of all, I've got a little bit of a complaint as far as analytics are concerned. I don't know if you've seen this yourself, KD, but we used to have what's called universal analytics, and Google
Mm,
had that product. It was what, most nonprofits are familiar with it. It's just the classic old, so to speak, analytics tool that was in your website if your developer put it in there. And you could go in, it was pretty easy to use. You could see traffic. And then they went and made this big jump about 2 or 3 years ago to what's called GA4, Google Analytics 4. And they've done that to, I don't know, I think it's more geared towards e-commerce in my opinion. And they've changed a lot of stuff around. So I sympathize with nonprofits that have to go in there now and try and figure this thing out. That being said, the basics are still there. You want to look overall at one of the key metrics is to see which content on your site, which pages are the ones that people are visiting the most. And what I'm talking about here is obviously they're coming to your homepage. Hopefully they're coming to your donate page, right? Hopefully they're coming to that. But aside from that, what individual service pages or what individual blog pages, and now we're getting back to blogging, are people looking at? That is a gold mine because it's showing you content that they're interested in that you can produce more of, but it's also saying, okay, well, maybe I can start to create experiences that will then court this individual as a donor over time. A classic example here would be, again, a healthcare or medical nonprofit that has an understanding of a particular disorder or disease. People are suffering from that. Family members are suffering from that. Where are they going? They're going on the web to find out information about that. If you are putting out content about that, they're coming to your page to learn more. And over time, I'm going to use kind of a nasty corporate term here. You can start to monetize that, right? I know it sounds cruel, but at the end, or crude is the word I want to use. But at the end of the day, you are providing a valuable service and insight, and they are learning from you over time. It's not such a bad thing to make an ask. So again, I'm pulling us off topic, but you want to look at that. You want to look at regionally where people are coming from. What devices are they using to get to you? How long are they staying on the page before they bounce off? Because that could point to unnecessary or poor content. So there's tons of ways to look at it, but those are some of the ones that I would immediately start with.
yeah, and even glancing at your analytics for a half hour a month can lead to some really significant changes, especially for small nonprofits that can turn on a dime if they absolutely need to, right? So there was
Sure.
one organization we were working with where there was buried under the services tab, there was some program that was just popping off, and it was like the
Hmm.
second biggest hit page, aside from the homepage. We're like, okay,
Right.
we need to pull this out. This has to be its own thing now, right? And so it can be as simple as just moving a page into a
Hmm.
menu item page, right? It can be as simple as that. It can be as simple as, oh, wow, we had 5,000 hits on a page that doesn't exist anymore. We need a redirect link. We got to fix that, right? So these are changes that, or these are things, the analytics are just so important
Hmm.
to just providing a little bit of insight, even if you're just doing that high level stuff, right? So where are people coming from? Where are they logging on at? What pages are getting the most amount of traffic? Some of those can just lead to very small changes that really improve the usability, and it
Hmm.
reduces the amount of people that you're losing, in the funnel somewhere off in space. Yeah. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what are some of the risks of not keeping the website updated and as optimized as it could? What are some of the risks
Hmm.
that nonprofits could potentially have?
The first example that comes to mind, or the first notion that comes to mind, is that you're losing someone that would have otherwise donated, right?
Mm,
Or even not to make it so transactional, you're losing someone who over time would have become a true blues supporter, right? Because let's face it, I mean, people are, and for lack of a better phrase, like first impressions matter. Let's put it that way, and visuals matter, and appearances matter. And even if you're this high quality organization that's been around, you got a strong board, if they come to a website that is poorly designed, that has again the poor stock photography, it shows that people haven't really kept up with it. That's a turnoff to the overall brand. Now, that's not to say they're not going to find some other way to give, but it's yet one more point of friction that you don't need to introduce in all of this. And if you flip that, the inverse of that is if you're creating this great experience, it's yet one more thing. You and I talked before about brand, right? Brand is everything that you're doing. And remember, this is your core storytelling item. So I think just to answer that question directly is you run the risk of actually losing money if your site is poor to the point that people can't get done what they need to do or they're turned off by your overall brand.
Mhm. And you're losing relationships, you're losing audiences, you're losing potentially trust in the larger
Right? That's
community,
right.
right? So yeah, and I think, thinking about these bigger things, it's just like, oh, oh, we didn't have time to get this up on the website. What if
Mhm.
you led with that? What if you said, hey, we're leading with transparency. That's one of our
Mhm.
values at our
Mhm.
organization. Or, involving community in our decision process. So even making an update about a future update, like
Mhm.
this might be coming soon, have a
Sure.
survey up there. We'd love to hear from you. Anything like that um, builds this kind of sense of authenticity and trust with the community that you're
And
working
then that
with,
we care,
right?
we care, we care. We
Yeah.
want to hear from you. Yeah, it's funny. You just as you were making your assessment before your comment about what we were just saying. Here's an exercise. So take something like St. Jude's or the American Heart
Mm,
Association, right? You and I know them intuitively. We know exactly what they do. They've got this huge brand, right? But if you went to their website and it was like this one-page thing and the user experience was really clunky and the images were from 1983 or whatever, you're thinking to yourself, I don't know about this. I don't know. I mean, I know it's not that I'm not going to give, but there's something off about this. And there's no reason to think why people won't have that perceptions of your organization if it's infinitely smaller as well too. So I just think it's of critical importance to invest what you can to give people a great experience.
yeah, absolutely. So American Heart Association is actually my favorite donor page at the moment.
That's great.
Do you have a favorite website or a favorite nonprofit donor page you just love?
I hate to be typical here, but like the end all be all of nonprofit websites has been for a while. Charity Water is really,
Okay.
they do such really great, like kind of cutting edge stuff. Covenant House also has a really nice experience. Overall, I enjoy what they do. There's a lot out there. I can think of a few more um, prior to us ending, but those are the
Yeah.
first two. Yeah,
Yeah. So one thing we haven't chatted about yet, mobile optimization.
sure.
So how do workers who are, working for nonprofits, like how are they testing this when they publish? Are they pulling up their phones?
Mhm.
Like what's your recommendation for just making sure that the user experience is so optimized across mobile
Sure.
and desktop?
Well, hopefully that starts from when you have done your last website redesign. Whoever worked with you, and if you're working off of one of these platforms like Wix or Squarespace, and I can, we can talk about. Well, I'm not crazy with either of those, but I get it. Okay, and we can talk about that. Those come to the table with what they call responsive web design, which Katie, as a designer, responsive web design is that you have one web address, but the site will kind of adapt and conform to the viewing device that you're on. So responsive web design is the end all be all. It's been like that for many years now. So you want to make sure whatever platform you work with, it's doing that. Um, but if you're designing it also custom as well too, the designer that you're working with needs to think through what a mobile experience is for your particular audience. You don't just want to take what you have on your desktop and tablet views and just say, oh, we're just going to compact that down. Because if you think about it from a common sense standpoint, people that are using their devices have a whole different set of expectations and needs and usages than we do on the desktop. On the desktop, you and I could sit here for hours and just sit through blogs and things like that. But on your phone, you're in a rush. You want to find out where the place is. You want to get that homepage up really quick and just get so you don't need all the information that you would need on your desktop page. So, again, the direct answer to your question is from the start, you have to make sure that you're catering that experience to what a mobile user wants. Now, if you've already designed your site, it's a matter of going in and making small tweaks, thinking about it again from an intuitive standpoint. Do we really need all of this information on the homepage? Are people really sitting here and going through a blog on their mobile device? They may. I mean, I read a lot on my mobile device, but again, it comes down to your audience again and thinking through who they are and what they want out of things.
Yeah, and I think that's so smart just to put yourself in, your audience's shoes. So, are you sitting at home in front of the TV already? Oh, and you pulled up your phone and you get a notification of a newsletter that comes through, or
Mhm.
something on your calendar, and all of a sudden you're in your email, then you're on the website and you just need like this one thing for, this one piece of information, right? So really thinking about like again who your audience is, how
Hmm.
are they arriving on your website, like through what streams, and
Hmm.
then customizing those particular landing pages, if you will, as best as you can for that unique experience, with options to learn more, at the
Right.
bottom, right?
Right.
So,
And analytics also plays a role here as well too, in that you can see how many people are currently coming to your site through a mobile device or through desktop. And it's funny when we first, as you mentioned before, we've been doing this for a long time. And when mobile first started coming around, it was like computers are going away entirely. Like if you're not building mobile first, you're done as an agency and as a nonprofit. And that simply didn't turn out to be the case. In fact, most of the clients we have and look at their analytics, it tends to be pretty much 50-50. I will say, not to be ageist, but if it's a younger demographic and a younger audience and an organization that caters to younger folks, you tend to obviously see a little bit more on the mobile end. But it's just important to have a good experience across devices, and looking at your analytics will help you understand who's coming to your site and what you should be doing for them.
mm, yes. Well, Lou, I would just have one more question for you here. I would just love to know what some key advice or just things to remember or questions to ask that nonprofits can take back to their teams,
Mhm.
and to their staff, and make sure that website optimization is at least on the calendar to do some
Sure,
time.
sure. Sure. Well, look, if our conversation resonated with people that are listening to this, and they're motivated and inspired to do something, I would come back to the table with these principles that we've outlined and emphasize how important the website is, while acknowledging that the role of it is changing, because you're going to get naysayers. You're going to say people saying, well, it's all about social media, or it's all about AI or what have you. And that's really just not the case. Right. This is, again, it's the place where you control the narrative. It's your storytelling device. So if you're able to make that case, then the question really becomes, what capacity do we have, and how much are we able to invest in this? And I'm not saying this is an ulterior motive, because this is what we do. It's the truth. The more that you're able to invest in your site, the better the product you're going to get. So whether that's working with the board, trying to look at operations, I would say start looking at grants. Those are few and far between, for what we're looking to do. But try to start to make investing in the site on multiple fronts a big part of the conversation. And then, in terms of execution, I would really go back to that book, or that concept of making it a daily habit, because you're going to get the question, well, who's going to handle this and how are we going to do it? It's a little bit at a time. It's key things, and just show improvement over time. And then the last thing I would say is don't leave it alone. Look at it as this important entity to what you're trying to achieve, and spend time with it. Boy, that came out weird, right? Spend time with
Spend you do have to spend a little
it.
time with it. That's half the battle
Right.
right there. So,
Yeah.
well, any final thoughts on website optimization?
Oh goodness, I don't know if there's anything left to say. I think I've exhausted you here with just again the idea that this is an evolving thing. It's critically important, but look at it as your key storytelling tool. If you have this vibrant social community and you're posting great things, not just events. Remember, that conversation can kind of get hijacked at any point. I mean, there's a social community. People can
It's
go on
true.
there and start talking about whatever they want, or pinning you down on things. Whereas this is your real estate, right? You own it. You're not, I mean,
Hmm.
you are tethered to a hosting platform, but if I'm not saying it's going to happen, but social media platforms, they can go down, they can change algorithms, they can do all these things. The site is yours, right? So approach it as such. And again, feel free, or try to invest as much as you can in it.
Sound advice. Well, Lou, thank you so much for taking the time today. Really enjoyed our conversation. I hope to stay in touch, and maybe we could just chat about websites for another 5 hours sometime. That
I know
sounded
we
great.
could. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.